Welcome to the Center for U.S. War Veterans Oral Histories at the National Guard Militia Museum of New Jersey in Seagirt, a partner of the Library of Congress's Veterans History Project. Today is August 29th, 2018. I am Carol Fowler, Director of the Center. My honored veteran today is Francis A. Bucky Grimm, Jr., who served in the Vietnam War with the United States Air Force. He served from March of 1964 until March of 1970. And was in Vietnam from January of 66 until January of 67. He served with the 366th Air Police Squadron and before that the 818th Combat Defense Squadron, and then after Vietnam with the 4500th Air Police Squadron. Thank you for wanting to be here today, Bucky, and also I should say that your job you trained for was Police K-9.
Right.
Your eyewitness account is considered a primary historical source and a valuable contribution to the Veteran Oral History Project. And good morning, Bucky, and welcome.
Good morning, Carol.
First, tell me how you heard about the project.
I heard about it from you 20 years ago
Almost.
while I was still a firefighter at Fort Monmouth.
Right.
And we never really got a chance to set up a date until recently.
Thanks to Facebook, I was able to message you.
Right.
That's really the only way.
I didn't know that you were still doing it until then.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's a year-round project.
right.
Yeah, I love doing this. This is my passion.
I'm sorry that it took so long to get here, but
Doesn't matter, you're here.
That's
It's
right.
wonderful.
that's right.
Bucky, how was your family? Was there anyone who served in the military before you?
My father and my uncle Noah and my uncle Todd. My uncle Noah was in the Army, my father was in the Army, and my uncle Todd was in the Navy. And then I had another uncle, Uncle Jimmy, he was in the Navy.
Did they ever talk about it?
No. My uncles Jimmy, my uncle Noah, they served in World War II, and my father served in World War II. And my uncle Todd, he went into the Navy just right after World War II was ended. But no, they never discussed any of their experiences with me.
Was everybody okay?
Well, my uncle Jimmy had some problems. He had some issues.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But well, my father was okay, and my other two uncles were all right.
You had been working as a bank teller?
Yes.
So how'd you come to be in the Air Force?
Well, I got drafted.
Okay.
Were
Were you expecting?
I was a bank teller in the Asbury Park Ocean Grove Bank, became New Jersey National. And I got my draft notice in December, I believe. It's November or December of 1963. No, it was December of 63. And then I didn't know what I wanted to do. I wanted to go to school to get, an education because I hadn't done so well in the college that I went to. And then I decided to enlist in the Air Force. So I
Oh, you
talked
were
to
drafted and yet you enlisted.
Yeah, I was drafted. I got my draft notice, let's put it that way. And then I decided to enlist, so I went to speak to the Air Force recruiter in Asbury Park, New Jersey. And that was in like the end of February, and then in March 19th, I believe it was, of 1964, I was inducted into the Air Force.
Why the Air Force?
I don't really have an answer to that question. I just selected them. I just decided
Okay.
the Air Force.
What kind of adjustment was it for you to go from civilian to military life?
Well, it was quite an adjustment because, I was 21 years old then, and had been out of high school for a few years and had been working and so on, and my experience in basic training was well, this is what I'm going to end up doing for a while, so I'm going to make the best of it. And I didn't have as much of a problem in basic training as some of the other recruits did, because I had, I guess, a little more time, and I was a little bit older, a little more mature. But it was quite an adjustment, I have to admit, from civilian life to military life.
Where did they first send you?
Well, I did my basic training at Lackland Air Force Base in Texas,
San
just
Antonio.
outside of San Antonio.
Mhm.
And then,
Do you have any stories from that?
well, I have the one thing that's interesting. Well, one of our DIs was standing in front of our formation one morning. We had already been given our uniforms. We were no longer rainbows anymore, just plain Jeeps, what they called us. And he said, I'm going to give you a list of what we call security instructions. I don't remember how many there were, 15 or 16 of them. Some of them were maybe one sentence long, some of them 3 or 4 sentences long. And the instructor said, the first one of you guys that can stand up here, no, he said the first one of you guys that can repeat these security instructions by heart, verbatim, you're going to get a 3-day break to go downtown to San Antonio. Well, that gave me a goal to shoot for. So I studied, and I've studied, and I studied. I became a geek about that. I didn't make any enemies about it, but I really worked hard. So I guess it was about our 3rd or 4th week into basic training. And the instructor asked us, Tech Sergeant Fitch asked us if there was anybody that could do it. So I raised my hand. Oh, he says, all right, Grimm, come on up here. Well, I didn't know that I was going to have to do it in front of the whole flight. I thought I was going to do it in his office or something like that. So I went up there and I stood next to him, and he asked me for this instruction, number 3, get number 5, and I repeated them all because I had memorized them. And I wasn't even, it was the whole thing was a blur. I didn't even remember looking at any of my fellow troops or anything like that. All I remember is doing it. And he said, all right, you got a 3-day break coming, get back in formation. And that was the biggest highlight of my experience in basic training, other than the firing range. I liked going there. That was cool. But that's about all I can explain to you about basic training.
What was it like to be in the South?
I didn't really spend a lot of time
Off
there.
base?
I only went to San Antonio a couple times. Everybody was, friendly towards us. We didn't have any incidences,
Okay.
to speak of.
So
It was interesting being in Texas. I had never been to Texas before, but I have since been back, and it don't look anything like it was when I was there. But yeah.
So a couple months, and then you graduated?
Yes, I graduated, and then I got orders to report to
Lincoln?
Lincoln, Nebraska. It's a strategic air command base. It's about 80 miles southwest of Omaha, which is where Offutt Air Force Base was. That was SAC headquarters.
Were you ever there? Offutt?
No, I never went to visit that base. But I was at Lincoln for, I got there in June, and I left in June. I got there in June of '64, and I left in January of '66, so that's 18 months. So that's where, at Lincoln is where I started out in security. And in the security police, we were responsible for the flight line duty, flight line and runway duty. We guarded a lot of other sensitive areas too, like the bomb dump was off the base. And I guess it was about the following year, around in June or July of '65, I was kind of like recruited to go into the canines. So I started working with the dogs in, like, I'd say June of 1965.
Air Police Tech School was at Lackland, right?
No, I didn't go to tech school.
Oh, okay.
That was basic training in Lackland. I did my technical training at Lincoln. It was a correspondence course.
Oh, okay.
I can't remember the name. I think it was a 75 AF 7500. I think it was the number of the tech course. I believe I might have a copy of something of it in my file there.
And you were assigned the 818th Combat Defense Squadron at Lincoln?
Right.
Let's talk about that.
Well, in those days, SAC was fairly, I would say new. The country had only had that command in service for maybe 10 years. I guess it was around that. It was in the 50s they started. And it was a very strict atmosphere because of the mission that the Strategic Air Command had. And what we had, the aircraft that we had there was B-47s. And we guarded those planes both on the flight line and both in the, what we call the rapid, I guess you'd call deployment area, where they had billets for the pilots. They slept right next to the planes. And then the other aircraft, they were all on alert, and we had different sections, and we guarded them in different ways. The B-47s, they phased them out in late '65, and they closed down Lincoln Air Force Base in January of '66. And that's why some of us were deployed to Vietnam, and some were deployed to other bases in the United States because they didn't have enough time left to go to Vietnam. Almost all of us that were in the canines we took all our dogs. There was only a couple of new guys came in because a couple of the veteran dog handlers that didn't have enough time to go took other dogs and they went to other bases in the United States. And
Let's talk about when you became a dog handler. What are your earliest memories of that job? Or training for that job?
One night I got a knock on my door in the barracks. There was a kid by the name of James Gardner from New Jersey. And he had a dog. The dog's name was Hans. And he said, "I understand that you're from New Jersey." I said, "I am." He says, "Well, I'm getting discharged. And I want to go home and join the state police. But before I go, I want to make sure my dog, Hans, gets a good man to be a handler. And I'd like it to be somebody from New Jersey." I said, "Sorry, Jim, I don't want to be a canine handler. I've been to that kennel, and it's terrifying." Because these were sentry dogs. They were trained to attack. And I went there because, as a new recruit, they take you all over the base, and they showed you everything. So they took us to the kennels one day. And I said, "Man, no way I'm going to do this."
Did you have a choice?
Yeah, I didn't have to do it. He just wanted me to volunteer to go.
Well,
and
you
take
said
his
earlier
dog.
you were recruited for canine. I don't know if an officer...
I kind of equate that, what he did as a recruit.
Oh, I see.
So finally, a couple weeks later, he approached me again. He says, "I'd like for you to think it over." I said, well, I don't know, I don't think I can do it. I mean, Hans, he's one of the bigger dogs, one of the younger ones. I don't know if I could do this. He said, well, come on down to the kennel. I'll introduce you to the kennel master and some of the other guys there, and we'll talk about it. So I went down there, and they liked my demeanor and everything, that I had, you know, a fondness for animals, which is very important. So anyway, they talked me into it. They said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to relieve Jim of Hans on Monday, and we're not going to feed him for 48 hours. Hans, we're not going to feed Hans for 48 hours. I want you to come down here on Wednesday morning with a bag of potato chips, and some snacks, whatever. And then we'll tell you what to do when you get here. So I said, okay. So I went down there. I had a bag of potato chips with me. Hans came, he come running up to the door, but he didn't jump and bark. He just came running up to the door because he smelled the food. He knew that I had food for him. So now they said, here's what you're going to do. Through the fence, through the gate, feed him these snacks. Just feed him the snacks. And then when he gets real accustomed to you feeding him, he's going to bond with you. Then we're going to open up the gate and let you go inside. I said, I have no problem with feeding him through the gate, but you're not opening that gate. Because the other dogs, well, they were all jumping around and barking. No, just go with us, and we'll see how it goes. So after about an hour, Hans was really like wagging his tail and everything, you know. So the guys came back and they said, well, what do you think? I said, well, I think I feel confident enough. But you guys aren't going anywhere, right? If anything happens, yeah, we'll watch you. So I got inside, they closed the gate, and they took off. Now it's just me and Hans. So I sat down on it was concrete floor. I sat down there, and he came next to me, and he sat in front of me, looking at the chips and everything. And so I fed him that and a couple other snacks, and I pet him, and that was it. I was in. So after that, they gave me his gear. We had a collar, a leather collar and a choke chain, a muzzle, and basically that was all I had. And I took him out and walked him around, put the collar on him. The collar, they know when you put the leather collar on, it's time to go to work. When they put the choke chain on him, that means that's time to train. So they told me how to train him. Taught me how to get him to do the certain commands that he was required to know. If you wanted to teach him anything else, you could. But there was basic commands that they had to know, verbally and silent. They taught me all of that. After about a week or so, I transferred from the flight that I was in security to the flight that was in canine. And that was about halfway through July. Then when they were satisfied that I could go out on post and do the job that was required to be a canine handler on post, they put me in there. And I kept Hans until I got orders to go to Vietnam. But I couldn't take Hans to Vietnam because he had third-degree hip dysplasia, which is a disease that attacks a lot of dogs, especially big dogs.
Oh.
So I had to get...
What kind of dog was he?
German Shepherd. So I had to give up Hans to this troop by the name of Klebe, and I had to take Klebe's dog, Duke 128E. But Duke wasn't as... Duke was older. He was like 7 years old. And he wasn't as aggressive as Hans was. And we didn't have a hard time making the conversion.
Oh, okay.
Klebe didn't have much of a hard time with Hans because he worked with Hans, well, next to him, not with him, but, you know, on posts. So he knew the dog. And he went to Bunker Hill in Kansas. And I went to Da Nang with Duke. Before Duke could leave, he had to have about 6 or 7 sebaceous cysts removed from underneath his skin. They had to shave him. And he was very self-conscious about it until his hair grew in. Whenever we would stand in attention or whenever we would stand in formation, he would try to hide behind my legs because he didn't want anybody to see him. But his hair grew back pretty quick. But I took him to Vietnam, and I had to leave him there.
I know. Did you have time to go home on leave first?
Yes, I did.
Did he go with you?
Excuse me? No.
Oh.
No, I went home in December of '65. I got engaged to be married then. And when I came back, it was right after Christmas. Between Christmas and New Year's, I came back because we had to close the base down January 1, 1966. And we did. I remember putting a lock on one of the gates that had a chain on it for the runway, and I went out got onto the plane and we flew to Lackland for what we call AIT. It was about, I guess, a 2 or 3...
Advanced infantry training?
Yeah, that's what they kind of called it. We had to get our dogs familiar with weapons. We had to get familiar with shotgun and other weapons. They couldn't be gun shy. The dogs could not be gun shy. So the training mostly was for the dogs. Some of it was for us. We had to get acquainted with jungle warfare, and because that's where we were going. The place where we were going was entirely different from where we were. So they wanted to try to do the best they had. They had a Vietnamese village set up, and we did a lot of surveillance and inspections and so on with the dogs in that environment. And after that, we embarked on our trip to Vietnam. It took 4 days to get us there. We brought in our troop, we had 2 planes, 2 C-130s. Half of us in each plane because we had crates with the dogs in them, and we brought food with us, dog food. So we had a few pallets of dog food, and each plane had, I think, 15 or 20 crates in it with the dogs. And the first place we landed was in Hickam Air Force Base in Hawaii. We got out, took the dogs out, exercised them, medicated them again with tranquilizers, put them back in the crates, went and got something to eat.
Was a vet with you?
You know, Carol, I don't remember.
So I'm wondering if any of the dogs have problems with the tranquilizers.
None that I recall, but I don't remember. We might have had a vet with us. I don't recall that detail. But we landed again. We stayed there overnight. We took off sometime very early in the morning, and we flew to. I always thought it was Wake Island. We landed at Wake Island. A couple of people think it was different. It might be in my orders. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to check?
Excuse me?
Do you want to look?
No, that's okay. And we landed at this base to give the dogs a chance to exercise again. And that took another day. And then we flew to Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines. We stayed there for 48 hours because we had to wait for a Marine pilot to fly us into Saigon. And they had no pilots available. So we had to wait till a pilot became available to fly us into Saigon.
Okay, let's look at the map now.
This is Saigon. Actually, it's Tan Son Nhut Air Force Base is where we landed in Saigon. We stayed there. That's where they split us up. They sent some of us to other bases in Vietnam, and 15 of us of the group that I went over there with went to Da Nang, which is up here. We flew up there. They flew us in the C-130 up there.
Could you point to it again, please?
Up Da Nang up here.
Oh, I see. Thanks. Let's talk about your first impressions of Vietnam.
Well, the flight from Tan Son Nhut to Da Nang was in the daytime. It was an early morning flight. And we didn't fly very high. We had a real good view of the country flying up there.
What'd you think?
And it was remarkable, it was so beautiful.
Nice.
I mean, it was unbelievable how beautiful it was. And you know, we look out on the right side of the aircraft, and you could see the South China Sea, because we flew on that route up
Right.
there, and on the other side of the aircraft, because the dogs were in the kennels, and once we got airborne, we could walk around a plane. They didn't have any problem with us. There was no seats in the plane. We had these cargo nets in the side that you sat in, because in the middle of the plane was all our cargo, was the dog food that we brought up and the crates with the dogs in them. So we could walk around the plane and we could look out the windows, and I could tell you without hesitation, it was the most beautiful country I had ever seen. From that height and that angle and everything.
Right.
At that time in my life.
And then what were your impressions when you got off the plane?
Well, we were greeted by the company, I could call him, commander. And he was not a very cordial. He was a lieutenant colonel. He wasn't very cordial. He really didn't even want to come to see us. But since we were there, he had to come and see us. And he kind of like introduced us to the routine, what we were supposed
The
to.
commander of Da Nang Air Base?
No,
Oh.
the commander of the
366.
366 Air Police Squadron. And I don't remember much of what he said. All I know is that we were in formation, and we were told that these NCOs were going to take us to these different places, and we had to billet our dogs because they had a kennel. It was a rough thing. The kennel that they had was made out of wood. Everything was wood and chain link fence. So we took our dogs and set them up in the kennels, and then we got back on the truck, and with our baggage, which wasn't much. We had a bag with some personal items in it and some uniforms. And we got on this flatbed truck, along with these big bags. And they drove us around on the other side of the base, on the other side of the airport, actually. Da Nang was an airport, turned into an Air Force base. And they said, okay, you guys can get out here. And we said, okay. So we got our stuff, and the NCO got out with us, and the truck left. And he takes us over, Sergeant Campbell. Sergeant Campbell takes us over to this pallet walkway. It was like a pallet walkway. And so often with these huge, great big bags. Said, okay guys, these are your tents, and once you get them set up, then that's where you're going to sleep. We
Yeah.
said, wait a minute. We're in the Air Force. we don't know anything about setting up tents.
Okay.
So Sergeant Campbell said, well, that's a problem you're going to have to solve. So fortunately, there was some guys there ahead of us, and they were standing watching this. They knew exactly what we were going to say because they had just said it a few days prior. So we didn't say anything, can't say anything. Okay, Sarge, whatever you say. So we split up in groups of 4, because each tent could, you know, accommodate four troops. So the guys came over, they let us stew for a little while, and they came over and said, we'll help you, don't worry about it, we'll help you. We'll get you unpacked, we'll set you up. And after about 8 hours, our tents were up. I got some pictures of it.
It's like a whole day.
Yeah. Well, these weren't small tents. These weren't little,
Up tents.
these were pretty large tents.
Like 6-man tents?
4. They could have been 6, but we had 4. We put 4 in there. And I think a couple of the guys had to double up with some of the guys who were already there because we had an odd number of group. I think there was 15 of us, something like that. Anyway, we stayed there in those tents for, months. I don't think we moved. They were building places for us to stay better and more sophisticated on another section of the base.
Quonset huts?
Well, they weren't Quonset huts, but they were like long buildings with peaked roofs. And you could put lockers in there and bunk beds and so on. So those buildings could hold 50 guys.
I was curious earlier when you said we're the Air Force, had you heard that Air Force usually had air-conditioned quarters?
In Da Nang?
No, I mean just in general.
No, I didn't know anything about air conditioning.
Oh, okay. I read that the Air Police Squadron was activated on January 26th of '66. So it was brand new when you were there that month. And then organized on February 8th of '66.
Well,
Did it seem like it was a buildup of Air Police at the time you got there?
I look at my orders. I'm pretty sure because when I gave you that information and I got it off my orders, and I can't verify that or not. All I know is what it said on my orders.
Right.
You know, because we didn't wear that kind of information on our uniforms. That was all for paperwork. Only thing we
What
had
did
on
you
our
wear?
all we had on our uniforms was our name, and it said United States Air Force on it.
Oh, okay.
And we had patches. We had patches on our sleeves, but that's the only thing we ever wore on our uniforms.
Well, what was your rank?
Well, I went over there as Airman Second, which is E3, and when I came back, well actually, I got the Airman Second when I got my orders to go to Vietnam. And then on my way home, during that period, I had gotten promoted to E4 Sergeant. They call it Sergeant in those days. Now it's called Senior Airman. But we used to call him Airman First. Well, I didn't realize that I had gotten this promotion until I went to sign in at Langley, at the orderly room. And I signed Airman Second, Francis A. Grimm Jr.
Is that when you were discharged?
No, that's when I got assigned.
Oh, sorry.
I had 13 months to do there when I got home.
Did we mention Langley? Where's Langley again?
Virginia. That's the 4300th Air Police Squadron.
Oh, that's right. Sorry.
So he said, I'm looking for a Airman First, I think he said, Francis A. Grimm Jr. I said, well, that's news to me. I guess I got promoted. He said, yeah, I guess you did. So I had to go and change the stripes on my uniforms.
So it didn't really change the job that you were doing?
It did a little bit, because when I got back into the States, I again, now Langley Air Force Base was Tactical Command Headquarters, TAC headquarters, which was a different mission. They were all fighter jets there at that. All the aircraft they had there were fighter jets, no bombers. And,
We can get to that part later.
okay.
So, back to Da Nang.
So, at Da Nang,
You got accustomed to sleeping in a tent.
we did. We adjusted to it.
How did the dogs handle the heat? Were they exposed to the sun?
Well, they didn't have to confront the heat that much because they were always in the kennel during the daytime.
Well, that's what I mean. I don't know.
At nighttime, so when we arrived, it was during the rainy season. It was very cool, but very wet, very damp.
Oh, I see.
Then about 3 months later, the rainy season left, then it got warm. May, June, July. Then it started to rain again in October. And it rained until I left. It's like the monsoon, they call it monsoon. We all call it the rainy season. When it's rainy season up in the north, it's the regular season down in the south and vice versa. So, we had a problem with disease. We lost a lot of dogs to leptospirosis, which was a common disease in that environment.
Was there medication for that?
Yeah, we had good vets there, and the medications were adequate. I won't say they were great, but they were adequate. And the vets inspected our dogs routinely. But fortunately for me, my dog never got sick. I was lucky. But a lot of that had to do with me, because even though I wasn't with him on duty, I would go to the kennel throughout the day to check on him. So I think we had almost 45 dogs there. I don't remember any more dogs coming while I was there, but I think we lost 3. I think we lost 3 dogs.
To disease.
To disease, yeah. It's a tough environment for them. But the reason why the shepherds were selected, or mostly selected, to serve in these areas was because of their ability to adjust. Hot, cold, damp, dry weather, they adjust very well. The shepherds and the Belgian Malinois were very, very good at adjusting to their environment. Well, we left in January of Nebraska, which is like, it was maybe 20 degrees there. And with the hawk makes it 20 below. And then not even in less than a month, they're in a tropical environment. I don't remember any of the dogs having a problem. I don't remember any of the guys complaining.
Oh, okay, that's good.
So I know my dog did very well, especially when his hair finally grew back in. But
How were living conditions for you?
I guess compared to what my brother went through and so on, they were excellent.
You didn't mention your brother.
Well, I think you asked me a question about other people in front of me and older
Or
than
at
me.
the same time, I should have said to you.
My brother served in the army in the 4th Division 3 years after me. And he spent his whole time in the jungle. And that's why he's dead now.
I'm so sorry.
So he was also a fireman at Fort Moss. Jack knows him. Knew him, I should say. And
What's
my
his
living
name?
conditions compared to what the other GIs had, I think was great. It was great.
What was your brother's name?
Todd. He's named after my uncle.
Did he have Agent Orange disease?
Oh yeah.
I'm sorry.
PTSD, everything.
Right.
He was in the infantry. And yeah, he He
When-
finally died.
When was that?
He died in April of 2010.
So is his name on the wall in Homedale?
Not on the wall. It's on a brick, though.
Oh, okay.
He didn't die in Vietnam. The names that are on the wall at the
Oh.
Vietnam Veterans Memorial, they died in Vietnam.
Oh, the bricks are the ones.
The bricks are the
from
ones that
Agent
died
Orange.
since then. And you'll see them along the walkways.
Did you take care of that? Having that done?
Yeah, Dennis Beauregard helped me do that.
Awesome.
He's the president of Chapter 12.
He'll be at the luncheon. You'll see him there.
Oh, really? Okay.
He's a recent veteran of mine. Let's talk about the bracelet. That's what I got from Dennis, what you're wearing today.
Well,
Can you hold it up?
this bracelet is a part of a fundraiser that we're having. And one of the associates for the chapter made these bracelets, or had them made. And what they are, they're little tiles, and each one of them has an insignia for the branches of the service. There's one for the American flag, and so on. The POW, MIA flag is on there. And we've been selling them for the last 4 or 5 months.
Oh, okay. All right, so let's get back to Da Nang. You had mentioned earlier your mission being guarding aircraft and the pilots' billets.
That was at Lincoln.
Oh, but what about your job, your mission in Da Nang?
We didn't have to guard aircraft like that in Vietnam. The
There were
aircraft.
MPs for that?
We guarded the runways. We guarded the ammunition. We guarded supplies. We guarded the perimeter. But aircraft weren't stationed in Vietnam like they were in the United States. They came and they left, so on and so forth. And when they came and if they stayed, they were there for maintenance. Otherwise, they were in the air. They weren't a set. Now, I'm going by what I think. Okay, there weren't a set amount of aircraft assigned to Da Nang. They were there. Maybe they were at another base, or so on and so forth.
That's a good point.
So it was an entirely different mission when you went to Vietnam from the United States. And then when I got back to the United States, of course, I had to get back into the way it was, because I forget the aircraft that they had at Langley. But anyway, it's still stay in Vietnam for now. Mostly our posts consisted of sensitive areas.
Let's talk about some of those.
Well, there was the perimeter, of course. We shared the security of the perimeter with the Marines. The 3rd Amphibious Marine Division was they were the host organization. That was their base. All the rest of us were support. There was Army, Navy, Air Force troops there. But the Marines, that was their base. So they had these bunkers, 6-man bunkers, every 2,000 feet on the perimeter of the base that faced jungle. One side of Da Nang Air Base faced the town of Da Nang.
Okay, Da Nang, the perimeter.
That was one of our posts. And what we did, one of us with a dog, we would walk from one bunker to the other. I forget how many of us there were. I forget how many. It might have been a couple miles of perimeter that we had to go. I think we had maybe somewhere around 4 or 5 posts out there, and we had, I think, 5 every 2,000 feet. We had 2 10,000-foot runways, so we had 5 posts between the 2 run. When we first got there, they were building another runway. While we were there, they finished it.
The Seabees?
No, it was private contractors.
Oh.
So They built the other 10,000-foot runway, so we worked 5 2,000-foot posts in between the runways. Then we guarded, this was a good post, we guarded the beer and the soda, and we guarded ammunition, and we had some flight line posts that we guarded. I don't know how many we had, but I'm gonna say we had around 30 posts throughout the base that we had to be responsible for guarding.
What were the shifts?
Well, we worked nights. We worked from sundown to sun up. So in the summertime, that could be maybe 7 or 8 hours. During the rainy season, it could be 14 to 16.
So obviously you slept during the day?
Yeah, if we could.
Because you learned
During the
to-
dry season, we got much more rest. Because we were home earlier and we were out later. That gave us time to get at least 2 meals and maybe circulate around the base to see what was going on. During the rainy season, there was just time just to try to stay dry and go on post.
And your weapons?
Well, we had ponchos, so I always carried my M16. The only time I needed my shoulder weapon was when I was on the perimeter posts and the runway posts. So when we were on the perimeter posts, we carried both the M16 and the 38. When we were on the runways, we just carried the M16. And then the other post, we just carried the sidearm 38.
Let's talk about your story about the top bullet is painted red.
I don't know if I want to talk about that.
No?
I don't know if I want to.
It's declassified.
All right. Well,
I think it's a good point of illustrating whose
Well,
idea
okay.
it was, and it didn't make sense militarily.
I don't know if any other branches of service, I doubt any of the other branches of service had to do this, but all our weapons were stored in the armory. When we went on post, when we went on duty, we went to the armory and got the weapons that we were supposed to be carrying for that particular tour of duty. Well, when we carried the M16s, they had 15-round clips, I think they had. It was about that long. That's 15 rounds. And the top round had red paint on it. And that was supposed to be visible to the armorer, both when he handed them to us and when we handed them back. That round better be on the top round of each clip. When we were on the perimeter, I carried 2,000 rounds. I had four pouches, and they checked each one of them. But when I got out on post, I took that red round out and put it in my pocket because I didn't want that going through my weapon. And then, like I was telling you,
The weapons would tend to jam.
well, it never happened as far as I know, but I wasn't going to wait to see if it was going to happen to me.
Okay, good point.
So you never knew from one day to the next whether you were going to need that weapon. Because Da Nang was in a pretty hot area. I mean, the 3rd Amphibious Marine Division was commanded by General Lewis Walt. And I credit him with saving my life because he was kind of like no nonsense. And he extended the perimeter almost 20 miles from the base, which put us in a pretty safe position. Not completely safe, but from we were kind of like, if anything big was going to come our way, we'd have known about it way before they got to us. But there were teams what we call zapper teams that penetrated our perimeters from time to time. They got in, but they didn't get out.
How many would be in a team?
A team.
A sapper team?
Oh, I don't know. It varies. Depends on who was available downtown, because that's where they came from. They came from the city, from Da Nang.
The VC?
Yeah, yeah. They were all around us. We knew that they were all around us, and we welcomed them on, the women and the children, and on the base. They did work for us, cleaned our clothes, so on and so forth. Occasionally the men come in because they would be working with private contractors and so on. And we always felt that, well, at least they're in front of us, we can see them, at least we know they're not going to bother us now. You know, at nighttime, that's when they came back.
Oh.
And if the women didn't give them the information that they wanted, because the women came on the base to spot where everything was, and if they didn't give them the information they want, they got beat up. And you could see that, and sometimes they would come, some of the women would come, they'd be bruises all over them, because they guess they didn't get the information that they wanted. But you know that's what happened. We knew all this was going on, so.
So when you would have perimeter duty, you would travel 20 miles from the base to the perimeter?
No. That was the perimeter that the Marines put up, the 20 miles out.
Oh.
The Marines canvassed that area constantly, swept it constantly.
But you didn't have to go that far?
No, we only went to the limits of the base.
I see.
Which was, I mean, it was like a jungle on one side and the base on the other. And we would walk from one Marine bunker to the next, and that would be my post for that night. And then the other K9 handler would be from that bunker to the next bunker, and so on.
What were your most memorable missions with Duke?
Well, this one's kind of comical. One night during the rainy season, we kept walking back and forth. So finally, about 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, one of the Marines hollers out to us, hey, you want to come in and have a cup of coffee? So I said, yeah, that sounds good. So Duke and I went into the base bottom cellar, if you want to call it that, of the bunker. It was 2 tiers. And they gave me some C-ration cookies and some coffee they made. So we're getting ready to go. So one of the Marines said, wait a minute, before you go, does that dog know any tricks? I said, oh yeah, he knows quite a few. Well, what are they? So I took my poncho off, set my M16 up against a table, and I went through all of Duke's tricks. He said I have him sitting on my back, sitting high. We did all the commands. These guys are clapping for him. They were entertained. So I said, well, I got to get back on post. So I got my stuff all together and put my poncho back on. And we're getting ready to go out the door, and the guy says, wait a minute. He says, is that all he knows? Oh, I said, he knows one more trick. Yeah, what is it? So I said, Duke, what would you rather be? A jarhead or a dead dog? And he just rolled over down, and he laid his feet out, and he's wagging his tail, and I said, dead dogs don't wag their tails, and he stopped wagging his tail. Now the guys didn't want me to leave, because they thought that there was more to show them, but that was it. That's all I had. That was the most memorable experience I had with Duke. And I mean, I love telling that story. Because he was his handler taught him all that, the Klebe that I told you earlier about.
Oh.
Taught him all of that. All I had to do was just keep
it going, yeah.
Keep it going. And we wouldn't do that stuff out on post. We'd only do it in the kennel when we were there for training and stuff. I never trained with him out on post. We just, because that's not right to do that. Some of the guys were doing that. And
it confuses the dog.
Well, the dogs really, they just didn't want to do it. You know, I mean, enough is enough. You mean animals get tired of training too, you know, not just humans. And some of the guys were like fanatical about, no, this guy's dog can do this, why can't mine? And if your dog didn't, then they started.
Oh, like a competition?
Yeah. Which, that never bothered me, you know.
You mentioned earlier that what's required is a fondness for animals. Was there ever anything where that didn't happen?
Yes. we had to dismiss a couple handlers for abusing the dogs.
Oh, no.
Yeah, yeah, because, as I said before, they wanted the dog to learn this and learn that and know how to do this, and if they weren't responding well to the training and everything, the guys started abusing the dogs.
Right.
And we had to, those ones that we knew about, we got rid of them.
Okay.
And we found somebody else to take the dog, and we had to train those guys to work with the dog. Didn't happen that often, maybe a couple times. It happened twice in Vietnam and once in the States. And in the States, if you abuse a dog, the repercussions are rough. You could get kicked out of the Air Force for doing that. You're abusing an animal.
Discharge.
In Vietnam, they just got reprimanded and then kicked out of the canines.
A dog in the police world, civilian police world, is considered a partner. Is that how it was
Yes.
in the military?
Yes.
Dog
Yep.
was your partner.
Yep. The emotion went up and down the leash.
You were his partner, he was your partner.
Exactly. Exactly.
You mentioned earlier about the leptospirosis and how Duke did not contract that. And you kind of said you think it was because of all the visits you gave him and the bonding that you had.
Well, I tried to stay on top of his health.
Let's talk about, oh, okay.
I tried to stay on top of it. If I saw something and I would recognize something was different, something was wrong,
Oh, and get it early, treat it early?
I wouldn't let it. I didn't ever find anything. I never saw anything.
What were
but
you
if I
looking
did-
for?
Excuse me?
Sorry, what were the symptoms that you would have?
Well, they would be very lethargic, don't want to eat.
Mm.
Their stools would be runny. I mean, just, they would be sick. Diarrhea and throwing up and not wanting to eat, losing weight, losing their ability to even stand up. Some of them, they get so weak. And that never happened to Duke.
And did you always have to bring him to the kennel when you were done working?
Oh, yes.
He never hung out with you other than that?
No. We had the same kind of setup as in the States. A separate place for them to stay, separate from us. Now, these are all sentry dogs. For the other branches of the service, they had what they call scout dogs. The Air Force didn't have any scout dogs because we didn't go out on patrol. Scout dogs were trained entirely different. And those guys, they did live with their dogs. And when they got back to base camp. Ours was wasn't like a base camp. Ours was like just where we were assigned, was an assignment. Building assignments, everything. Well, the scout dogs, those guys stayed with their dogs the whole time they were there. And they trained them quite often to detect certain things, booby traps, the enemy, so on and so forth. I have a lot of friends that were scout dog handlers. I met a lot of guys since Vietnam that were scout dog handlers. And they told me a lot of things about how their life was and compared to how our life was. Entirely different.
Do you have any other stories from any of your missions?
We're in Vietnam. Well, I'll tell you, Carol, basically, day by day it was fairly routine. The only thing was different might be the post that we're going to work that day or that night.
Right.
There were some pretty interesting experiences we had working on the runways. One night, Sergeant Campbell came by in his little pickup truck, and he would visit each one of our bunkers. They were sandbag bunkers about that high, maybe 6 feet square, for us to jump into if we needed to. So I'm sitting at my bunker one night, and Sergeant Campbell came up, and I went forward and I reported my post, and he said, "Go Grimm, I gotta ask you a question. Have you seen anything odd here tonight? I said, I don't think I understand what you mean, Sarge. He says, well, have you seen any bombs floating around? I said, bombs floating around? I said, no. What happened? He says, well, one of the fighter jets came in with a 500-pound bomb hanging on the rack. It wasn't able to drop it. It was hanging on the rack. And when he landed, he got down to the end of the runway. It wasn't there. So it's got to be out here somewhere. Oh. I said, well, it's not here. I would have called you right away. So he drives up to the next bunker. And he drives up to the next bunker. And he drives up to the third one up. And that's where they stopped. All the lights were going on. The EOD comes running out. All these guys come running out. And running down the runway. The bomb came off 3 bunkers up. Almost to the last one. So when they got there, the handler was sitting on the bunker just looking at the bomb. Just standing there staring at it. I'm trying to think of his name. He was from California. Anyway, I can't think of his name right now, but he was kind of a quiet type of guy. Always was. Good handler, but very stayed, to himself. And he was very quiet that night. But yeah, the bomb, it came off, it fell off the rack. I guess when he was driving down the runway, whatever it was holding it up there, released it. And it just rolled off the runway, and then I guess it had a point on it, and it slid up through the ground, and then when enough dirt got in front of it, it stopped. And they picked it up and took it away. These are the kind of things that you're not supposed to have to happen. But
It's a miracle, right?
oh yeah, yeah, yep.
Were you at Da Nang, let's see. Were you there on January 25th of 66?
Yes.
Because I read that Da Nang's nickname was Rocket City.
The town of Da Nang?
Well, no, the base, because of the attacks. Rocket attacks. And there was...
We didn't have any rocket attacks while I was there. That started in 67.
Actually, on January 25th of 66, there were 20 rounds and 1 KIA and 6 wounded in action.
That might have been another side of the base.
Oh, okay.
We did sustain a couple mortar attacks that were close to us, because we went on alert and we ran to the... I remember us, we were at the Airmen's Club. We had a little tent, they called it Airmen's Club.
Mm-hmm.
And these mortars started landing, so we all know when that happens, you run to the armory and get a weapon. So we ran, and they were just throwing the weapons to us as we ran out back and jumped in a great big bunker and waited for assignments. That's the only thing I remember. I don't remember any rocket attacks.
Oh, okay.
Like I said, I heard about the rocket attack after I left. And that was I believe it was in February of 67. But see, they started lobbing them in from 18 to 20 miles out. They didn't have that kind of ordnance when we were over there. Well, if they did, they weren't using it. But see, General Lewis Walt didn't stay there the whole time that I was there. He left about 4 months before he went back to the United States to get another star. He got a promotion. And the other commander that took over from him had a whole different agenda. And so I think that that perimeter that I told you that the general had, I don't know whether he maintained that.
Oh, I see.
So, but it didn't get hot while I was there.
Right.
But it did get hot after I left, and stayed that way for quite a while.
Right.
But while I was there, I credit the Marines, because they had a very, very strict, rigid code, if you want to use that word.
It's a good word.
Yeah.
So, were you also at Benoit or no?
No.
Or Fan Rang?
No.
Okay. Oh, I know. How was morale at the time you were there?
The only thing that some of us had a problem with was with mail. I got into a little problem with that. I wrote a letter home to my mother that we weren't getting any mail. But it was not me that wasn't getting the mail, it was a friend of mine. I was getting mail fairly regular, but I wrote this letter to my mother. And my mother called the senator, the state senator from New Jersey, and complained. So one day, I get a message. I got an order to go see the colonel. And I had to bring all my letters. And I had kept my letters in empty ammo boxes, because the only thing you could keep them dry in. So I brought a couple ammo boxes with all these letters in it. And I'm standing in front of the colonel, and he's asking me why I wrote this letter about not getting any mail when I got all these letters here. And he's not very happy. He was very upset about it. I said, well, sir, to be honest with you, I did write a letter to my mother, but I didn't tell her that it wasn't me that wasn't getting the mail. He says, well, you're going to write a letter to your mother explaining that. And before you mail it, I want to read it. So I had to go right back to the building that we were in. We were out of the tents by then. And I wrote this letter. And I had to take it back to him, and he read it. And he said, okay. I thought for sure I was going to get some kind of punishment for this. And I wrote this letter explaining to my mother what was going on, what happened. Evidently, I don't think she thought anything was going to happen. But it did. And I have to tell you, that was the only thing, I think, as long as I can remember, that bothered the guys that were there, if they didn't get mail from home.
Sure.
Everything else, we were able to deal with it. The weather, the food, whatever it was, we were able to deal with it. But not getting mail from home was a big thing. Especially for me, because I was looking every day from a letter from my fiancée. And of course, you know how when you're 21 years old, you know how it is. So anyway, but I was getting, there was only one period of time there where it was a little maybe a month or so where the mail wasn't coming in regular. But basically, that was the one thing that affected morale for the people that I work with, that I served with.
What about packages from home?
Well, every once in a while, we would get boxes that they would come in and they would drop them off at the armory, and we could come in and go through them and pick them up. Occasionally, we would get personal packages from family members with food in them.
Where would the other packages come from?
Or I would say groups like Girl Scouts, Cub Scouts, organizations like
Even
that.
back then?
Oh yeah, yeah, especially around the holidays. You know, on Thanksgiving, 4th of July, Christmas. They would be loaded with goodies.
What about?
And little letters they would send you.
That's really nice.
Yeah.
Did you have any pen pals who you didn't know?
No.
What about any USO shows?
Well, Bob Hope came to Da Nang with Ann Margaret and a few other people. And I didn't go to see that because it was on the other side of the base during the rainy season, and I just couldn't make it over there. But Roy Rogers came to see us, and we saw his show. Frances Langford, she came, we saw her show. What was interesting about Roy Rogers, we were at the chow hall. We call it a chow hall. So just, like I said, a big tent with a bunch of tables in it. We're sitting there, me and a couple buddies of mine, and Roy Rogers comes over to us. He's got his cowboy suit on, his hat and everything. And we got up to introduce ourselves to him and shook hands with him. I mean, his hand was like putting it in a vice. I hadn't shook hands with anybody like that before. I mean, he was like really thin and everything, but like strong as an ox. And very pleasant, sat down with us, talked to us, asked us a lot of questions, and wanted to know if we needed anything. Because at all of the bases, air bases, every air base had clubs in it, airmen's clubs, and Army troops had a club there, and Elvis Presley supplied every one of those clubs with whatever they needed. If they needed soda, if they needed beer, whatever it was they needed. Elvis Presley supplied all of that. So we had an airmen's club, and we had everything we needed. And Roy Rogers came in and sat down and talked with us, and I thought that was pretty memorable.
It's a special memory.
Yeah, quite a man. He was quite a man. I never got a chance to talk with Frances Langford, but she was very, very pleasant to us. But I really wanted to go over to see the Bob Hope show, but it was just too far away, and like I said, it was pouring down rain. And
how did you get around on the base? Just walking? Or?
Yeah, if we were off duty, we walked everywhere.
Right.
Yeah, and on duty, of course, we were driven places.
You didn't have a bicycle?
No, I got pictures of some of my friends that had, I guess you could rent them. They had an area where you could rent them, and they were off duty during the dry season. And I got a couple pictures of some of my friends. I didn't bring them with me though.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, there were some bicycles on the base, and I think just about all of the people that came on base from Da Nang that were working on the base, they always walked, or they would bring in these carriages, like especially the girl that did our laundry.
Right.
She would bring in these like carts, because she would do not just us, but she would do 7 or 8 other, and there would be a lot of laundry, so she couldn't carry it all, so she would bring it in a cart, and it had, each bundle would have our names on it, and then we would pay her at the end of whenever we got paid, she got paid.
So I guess you had news of the progress of the war while you were there?
No.
No? Stars and Stripes?
Stars and Stripes were, I read a few of those papers from time to time, but I didn't keep up on what was going on. I didn't really care.
What about your family? Did they write to you what they would see on TV?
No. What did happen though? My cousin Johnny Halliday, he was a corpsman in the Marine Corps, and he was deployed 40, 50 miles southwest of me, and he wrote me a letter. It was an in-country letter. One of the local New Jersey boys had gotten his head blown off, and John was with him, standing right there with him. His name was Tinker Dorn, and his father and his parents had a photo shop in Red Bank, and the Marine Corps has a special, they do a special thing for it. They have a society, Tinker Dorn Society. Anyway, John wrote me this letter, explained to me what happened. This was the first half of '66, a few months before the first half. And he didn't give me any information about what they were doing and where they were at, but he just told me that he was okay and that they were, well, he did say that they were out in the field, you know, they were away from their, at that point in time, they were away from their base camp and they were out in the field. And that's where they were when Tank got his head blown off. They were walking across a rice paddy. So fast forward now to somewhere in the end of June. We decided that we were going to have a barbecue. So we had traded some beer for beef from the Marines. The Marines had the meat, we had the beer. So we traded off, and we gathered up enough food and beer and stuff, and then we got permission. The Marines went and they swept, they mine swept, I don't know, 100 yards of China Beach, and then cordoned it all off, and then transported us there. And we got off the trucks, and we went down to the beach, and we had a barbecue. And it was kind of like an R&R, because I didn't go R&R. I gave my R&R to my good buddy. There's a picture of him there. I gave my R&R to him, Ron Kingsley,
Why?
because I wanted to save money. I was trying to save money because when I got home, we were going to get married. So I didn't want to spend any money on R&R, because when you went R&R, wherever you went, like he went to Thailand. He was there for a whole month. The R&R's was 2 weeks. So he took mine along with his, and he was there for a whole month, and he spent a fortune, but he had the money, so I saved my money. So anyway, we're coming back now. We're back going into our building, and I'm wearing a pair of shorts and my flip-flops, and I'm carrying this cooler, which still had some beer in it. We were going to finish that night. As I'm walking down the pathway between the lockers and the beds, I hear this guy call my name. "Hey, Bucky." I ignored it, kept walking. I thought it was one of the guys that was with me. "Hey, Bucky," and I turn around and there's my cousin John. And he still had his flak jacket on and his helmet and everything. I said, "Oh my God, John, come on down here." So he goes down to where my bed was, and we sat there and we talked, and he explained to me that he was going back to the States. They had just picked him up in a helicopter, because when their time was up, it's up. It's time to go back. They don't care whether you're on an assignment, whether you're at base camp, they come and get you and take you out. With us, it was different. We all left. We came together, we all left together, as those of us that were still alive. So anyway, John explained to me how he was going back home. And he just wanted to say hello. He knew where I was. Didn't know exactly where I was, but he knew that I was on Da Nang Air Base. And he was getting ready to fly out in a plane in about 20 minutes. He thought he was going to have more time with me, but he wasn't expecting me to be partying down the beach.
Oh.
Yeah, one day, out of 366 days, one day,
He thinks that's what
and that's
you
the
did.
day he has to come and see me. We joked about that for years until he died. But, oh my God.
I was curious if your grandparents were alive at the time, to have two grandsons
My grandfather
there at the same time.
My grandfather died, the grandfather that was alive when I went in the service, died while I was, he died the year that I came back from Vietnam. I was at Langley Field in Virginia when my grandfather died. My mother, his wife, my grandmother, she died when I was about 5, and then my father's parents died way before I went in service. In fact, I think my grandfather Grimm was 49 when he died, and I think he died in 49. 1949, I was 6 years old then. So, no, just the one grandparent.
So
But he
how-
never got
how
the chance.
sorry, How must it have been for him to have two grandsons there at the same time?
Well, he didn't know about my brother Todd because he was deceased when my brother Todd went in.
No, I mean your cousin. Was that his grandson too?
No,
Oh, okay.
this cousin was through marriage. I called him my cousin. This was actually my wife's first cousin. But I always called him cousin. And his kids call me uncle.
Mm-hmm.
So, but, yeah, I call him my cousin, but he wasn't blood. He was my wife's cousin. And he was he was a year behind me in school, but we were the same age. I had him, I think, by 5 or 6 months.
So that's cool that you wrote to each other over there.
Well, I never wrote to him that I remember.
Oh, okay.
I don't remember, but if I did, it was only one letter, because the letter that I received from him was only a few weeks before I saw him. And I knew he was in Vietnam, but I didn't know where until he sent me that letter. And
While you were there, things were kind of going nuts over here. The race riots of '66 and '67. Did your family write to you about any of that?
No.
Or were there any incidents of racial problems?
In Vietnam? No. No. We didn't have any.
Integrated, everything was,
I don't recall having any problems
right.
with race. I was not a follower. I was in the service with a lot of guys from the South. In fact, my friend there, Ron, was from Chattanooga. And the reason why I brought that picture of him is because he became my best man at my wedding.
Oh.
He came from Chattanooga. He came up to be my best man. And
He's on the left, the taller one?
yeah, the one that's dressed and ready to go on duty. I'm not, as you can see, ready to go on duty, which is consistent with the way I've lived all my life. Anyway, I spent a lot of time with guys from the South, and I never had any problem, even though I was from New Jersey, and I know they probably had some things to say about me behind my back, but I didn't have any problems.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing we knew when we were getting ready to come back to the States, there was rumors going around about how these demonstrations were getting kind of out of hand, and the way that a lot of the guys were being treated when they got home, especially if they were in uniform. And it wasn't recommended that we wear our uniforms home. I did. I didn't have anything else to wear, but I did. Anyway, I didn't have any incidences that I can relate to that would be meaningful.
Right.
But I know a lot of people that did, and it was not easy for them.
Oh, okay.
But no one bothered me. But I will say this: it was recommended that we don't talk about being a Vietnam veteran. It was recommended that you don't mention it if you go out into the countryside. And like I said, I still had 13 months to do in
The
the
countryside?
military. And when I got home, when I got finally discharged from active duty, I never mentioned it to anybody. And I started to forget about the things that I did and everything. And I did a good job. I forgot it all.
Because you just got on with life.
I just decided not to remember it. I just didn't want to talk about it. I didn't really want anybody to know that I was a veteran. The thing that got me though, my father was a member of the VFW. And when my brother came home, my brother wanted to join the VFW. I didn't want to join the VFW. And the biggest reason why was because they didn't recognize us as veterans. When
That doesn't make sense.
When my brother and I finally did apply to be members of the VFW, they said they couldn't accept us because we weren't veterans of a foreign war. So my father said, "Oh, really?" He says, "If my sons can't be members of the VFW, cancel my membership."
Which post was that?
2140 in Long Branch. No, 2140 in Long Branch is where I belong now. The one that wouldn't accept us was in another town called Oceanport. You know where Oceanport is. That post, I don't think they even exist anymore. I think everybody went over to Long Branch and formed 2140. But by then, I was a member because they accepted us. But they didn't want to argue with my father.
So your father left the post and they
No,
didn't-
he threatened to.
Oh,
If we weren't accepted.
and so they accepted you.
They accepted us, and I don't know how they got away with it, because I don't think it was just them, it was the overall attitude of the
I have heard that
VFW.
before. It was the times back then, right?
Yeah, and the VVA didn't exist then. The VVA they didn't start that till 1982.
And things have turned around. The World War II veterans are very active now, welcoming home troops, and the reason they do it is because of what happened to the Vietnam veterans when they came home.
Right.
How was your homecoming?
Oh, it was great. I grabbed a hold of my fiance and didn't let go of her until we got married, and then we've been together ever since. She went with me down to Virginia, and
Before we get to that, I forgot to ask, how was leaving Vietnam and leaving Duke?
leaving Duke was hard.
And how exactly did that work? Oh, someone else took him over.
Yeah, his name was Billy Hall, and like I said, he was from Alabama, and he took care of Duke. I don't think Duke was still alive when they evacuated, because he would have been 15 years old then. And I don't know how long he made it. I don't remember hearing any more about him. And Billy, I communicated with Billy last year, I think, where I had been communicating with him on email. And I don't know if he heard any more about if the guy that he gave Duke to when he left ever communicated with him again. But I'm gonna say he most likely was not alive when they evacuated in '75.
Right.
Because he would have been,
Almost a whole decade later.
yeah, he would have been 16, 17 years old then.
Mhm.
So, but it was hard because we had a bond. I took him there, I brought him there, and then I had to leave him there. And I think that it bothered me for a while. I think about him all the time, especially now, since we started the United States War Dog Association. And, well, I joined another organization before that called the VDHA, the Vietnam Dog Handlers Association. But I kind of like got reacquainted with Duke during events like this, and meeting. I joined the VVA shortly after they formed, but I didn't get real active with them until after I retired from the fort. Well, maybe a little bit before, because I got active when they helped us raise money. Chapter 12 helped us raise money for our memorial that's at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial now.
And
They
how
helped us raise money, and so I got back with them, and I've been pretty active with them. Not as much as I'd like to because of my health, but I've been pretty active with them for the last 7 or 8 years.
Would you say that helped change your mind about talking about it? You had made a conscious
Oh, yeah.
decision to not talk about it.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. The guys that are in that chapter are phenomenal, Those guys are the best guys there. I mean, I can't say enough good things about them.
The projects they do,
Oh, yeah.
the cemetery project? Or the cremains?
The cremains.
Right, I'm sorry.
Right. That's a fairly recent project. They just started doing that about 5 years ago. I sometimes lose track of time, but I know it's been a little while since they started doing it, and it's very frustrating because a lot of these funeral directors are, not all of them are eager, let's say, to cooperate, to help out. They don't want to go searching through their archives, if you want to use that word, to find remains, cremated remains in their possession. Because I don't know why. Because they don't have to do anything. We do all the work, or our representatives do all the work. All they need to do is just give us names. If they got these people, if they got these remains in their possession, just give us the names. We'll do the research. And so some of them are cooperating, doing very good.
And what would the research entail?
Well, a name would help, and to find out if they're a veteran. And if the record shows that they have cremated remains of a veteran, then what they need to do is to search and find out if there's any next of kin that might be interested in having those remains. And if not, then we get permission from the authorities. I don't know exactly to name them. They get permission from the authorities then to take possession of those remains and inter them in a federal cemetery.
So what's the oldest time period that a funeral home might have unclaimed cremains?
It's hard to say,
Like decades?
Carol. It depends on the funeral director.
50 years?
Like we have funeral directors in Long Branch that are 4 or 5 generations that go back into the 1800s that they started. Yeah, and then we have a couple of funeral directors that are brand new. They just started. So it depends on the funeral home and the history behind them, what they have. There's been a couple funeral directors in our area that have been very, very helpful.
Who started the project?
The person in the chapter, or you mean who?
Or it was started somewhere in the country, I guess.
I can't answer that question.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't have that information. I don't know those names.
It's a great idea.
Oh, yeah. We started it in Rich Gow, Rich McGovern, and Ernie Diorio, and there's a few other guys.
He's one of my veterans.
Yeah, they're involved in it. And then when they need some extra bodies to participate, I have done a couple of them. But those guys do all the legwork. They're really, really great at what they do.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like it.
And we're going to, I think, inter some in the near future. I don't have those notes with me, but they just interred some recently, and then we're going to do some in the near future.
The veteran you mentioned, Billy, how did you get back in touch with him? And when was
he
that?
told me that he would keep in touch with me. So I gave him an address to send anything, letter, pictures, anything like that.
So the old-fashioned way?
Yeah.
Exchanging Christmas cards and things like that?
Right. Well, no. The only time I communicated with him right after was that one letter that he sent about the rocket attack and a picture of him and Duke. And then I decided some time ago to try to contact him. And I'm trying to figure out how I did it.
Since you're on the computer?
Well, yeah, it was definitely through the computer, but I can't remember how I actually located him. I think it was I saved something that he sent me. I think it was an envelope or with an address or something. Anyway, I communicated with him. I got him. But what's interesting about Ron, I had not been able to talk with him since our wedding. Except for the one, he came up to see my son when he was born in 1969, September of 69. And that was the last time I communicated with him. And I tried to find him. I used his address that I had, and no one knew who it was. So now fast forward to 2016. My wife's cousin passes away from a heart attack.
The one from Vietnam?
No,
Oh.
no, another cousin. He was a police officer in Long Branch. My brother, who was a police officer in Las Vegas, calls me up on the phone and wanted to know if it was true. I said, yeah, it's true, but how did you find out? He said, well, it's on Facebook. Lori, his wife, says. I said, what's Facebook? He said, I don't know. He says, I'm not on it, but that's how we found out about it. It's all over. So I told my wife, I said, you know what? I'm going to go on Facebook. Let's see what this is all about. So I went on Facebook, made some friends, and so on and so forth. And on the one page, there's a little window, it says search. So I said, just for the heck of it, I'm going to type in Ron's name. Ronald Kingsley, Chattanooga, Tennessee. Came right up, he was number one.
Good for you.
So I sent him an email. I sent him a text message on, well, no,
Facebook
actually,
message.
I sent him a message on his Facebook page.
Requested to be his friend?
Yeah, well, I asked him if I could call him. And he sends me back a message, yeah, sure. And then so he sent me his number. And so I've been communicating with him for the last couple of years.
So that was after how long of a time? 40 years? 45 years?
69, 70, 40, 49 years.
It's incredible.
My son will be 40, my son will be 49 next month.
Mhm.
Yeah, 49 years.
It's absolutely amazing.
It truly is.
So
Truly
you
is.
and Ron have been talking on the phone?
Yes.
What about all the reunions that your squadron had? Did you go to any?
No.
Did they have your
I
address?
think I've only seen one. I think I've only seen one in the locator portion of the magazines.
Oh,
And
what magazine?
well, there's a locator in the VVA magazine, and there's a locator in the VFW magazine. And I think I only seen one Air Force, Air Police, AP Squadron reunion, and I think it was somewhere out west somewhere. I
Right.
couldn't make it. If they ever had one around here, I'd like to go, but
According to that website, and you'll go home with the printout from it, there are quite a few, I mean, they meet frequently. It seems like almost every year they meet. All over, Riverside, I don't know.
the 366 AP Squadron?
Mhm, yeah. That would be cool if you would go to one of those. And definitely take pictures and send them to me.
Okay, but it's not likely to happen. But if it does, I will.
Mhm.
I will.
That's good. Did you use your GI benefits?
Yes, I applied for benefits because of my diabetes and because of my heart. I got a heart
Oh,
condition.
VA benefits.
VA benefits, yeah. And I'm receiving compensation,
Good,
30%.
good.
And that's because of the guys from Chapter 12.
Right.
They twisted my arms to the point where it hurt so bad I had to go. And they were right, and I was wrong. I didn't think I would qualify for anything.
Okay.
And yeah, so now I'm collecting enough money to cover for my medications,
Oh, that's excellent.
which is, that's very helpful.
Good.
Yeah.
What about a mortgage or
Yes,
Education?
I applied for a VA loan, or a VA-backed loan mortgage for my house.
good?
And we still live in that house, and I went the whole 30 years. I paid $165,000 for a $15,000 home. When we took the mortgage out in '70, it was a $15,000 mortgage. by the time I got done with all the interest, I ended up paying back $165,000. But they backed it up, so I was safe. Yeah.
Education benefits?
I tried a correspondence electronics course. Now, here's the thing. If you take a correspondence course, or even if you go to a school and apply, or go to a regular school, you have to pass. If you don't pass, you got to pay. So I was paying my monthly, and I passed the course, they would have reimbursed me for all the money that I spent on it. But I couldn't continue with it because I needed help, and there was no one local. I had to I had to write letters to people, to ask questions, to get help. And these courses, certain sections of it were timed. I had so many months to do it and send it in. If I didn't, then they would expel me. So I just couldn't keep up with it. My children were small, and I was working 2 jobs, and it just didn't work out. So, but I tried. But they would have covered me if I had finished it up.
Did you have veteran preference for your federal job?
Yes.
When did you start at Fort Monmouth?
Well, at the time, in March of 1983, I was working on the railroad, this railroad out here. And they went on strike on the 1st of March 1983. And I told some friends of mine, and one of the friends was Armin Guzzi, who was at that time assistant chief at Fort Monmouth. And he and I were school chums. We went to school together, a year younger than him. And he was at my local volunteer firehouse visiting a friend of his. This is now the 15th of March. And I came in, and he says, "What's going on?" And I said, "Well, I just came from the picket line. I got some good news and bad news." And Armin said, "Well, what's the good news?" I said, "Well, the good news is the strike's going to end." "All right, what's the bad news?" I said, "The bad news is probably some of us in a non-operating department are probably going to lose their jobs to pay for these raises that they're going to give the brakemen that went on strike." "Okay," he goes, "I'm going to tell you this one more time. I told you this 3 years ago. I want you to go over to building 739, get a 171 form, fill it out, bring it to me. Because this is the last year of the Vietnam's Readjustment Act. It expires. I can get you a job at Fort Monmouth if you do this, and you got to do it now." So I did.
Good timing.
And he did. And I started working at Fort Monmouth in May 18th of 1983. And they waived a lot of things. I had to go for a physical. But they waived a lot of other stuff.
You were 40.
Yeah. Now, as a result of that, when I became 57, I couldn't retire because I didn't have 20 years in. You have to have 20 years to get a minimum basic retirement. So they let me work till I was 60 at the fort, and then I could retire.
How did that work?
Well,
Mandatory federal.
it's a law. They have, federal firefighters have to, it's mandatory that they have to retire at the age of 57 if they have more than 20 years service.
Oh, I never knew that last part.
Well, because I didn't have 20 years service,
Jack had 33.
they weren't going to penalize me, so they allowed me to work 3 more years. So in March, well, actually in May of 2003, I retired. I had to retire.
That's good. All right. You had mentioned there was a Vietnam vet from your squadron at Fort Monmouth. I don't know if you mentioned it on camera, but you said it when you came in.
Well,
You knew while you were
he was
working.
a police officer at Fort Monmouth, and we got to, I can't remember his name now, but he was stationed at Da Nang a few years after I left, and somehow we got into a conversation about being in police in the Air Force, and I had told him that I was a police officer in the Air Force, and that's how we got to talking about Da Nang and everything. But I only spoke to him a couple times about it, And,
And that was rare for you to do that, right? With anyone.
right. Right, the only people that I talked to, there was, 2 Vietnam veterans at Fort Monmouth that I was very friendly with, Bobby Jackson and Alan Trask. And then, of course, my brother came over later on. But that's it. We didn't talk much about Vietnam. We just knew that we were both veterans, that's all. And neither one of them, well, my brother did eventually join Chapter 12 and became, before he died, I gave him as a Christmas gift, maybe it was his birthday gift, his life membership to the VVA. But the other 2, Bobby Jackson and Alan Trask, don't belong to any veterans organizations.
Did your brother talk about Vietnam with you?
No. No.
Sounds about right.
I'm going to say no, because if we did discuss it, it was very brief, and I don't even think it was what he did as much as how he felt about coming home. He didn't have very pleasant experiences coming home.
It was a traumatic homecoming.
Yeah, for him it was.
Did any of the Grimms go on to be in the service?
My brother's son, his son, joined the Army, and it was assigned to the 4th Division like his father was. And he was in the first Gulf War. He was in the tank division in 1991, I think it was.
Yes.
The first Gulf War. He served there. He's still in the. He's going to be getting. He became a life
Made a career
out of it. He's been all over the world. He's got 3 sons, and I just saw him recently this past summer. He came to my house. He's living down in I think Virginia now. He's stationed somewhere in Virginia, and
What's his rank? NCO?
oh yeah, but I can't remember.
Sergeant First Class?
No, I think he might even be a master sergeant. Yeah, I think he's a master.
What's his name?
Todd,
Oh, another Todd.
same as his father.
It's 3 Todds.
Yep.
Unless he has a son Todd.
Well, he's got 3 sons, but none of them are named Todd. And I think that's ended. It's going to end with him.
Yeah, that's a lot of
Yeah.
Todds.
Yeah.
Any other messages or words you would like to share with us today?
Well, I'd like to say thank you, Carol, for giving me this opportunity to be here. And I just have to confess that I really am surprised that I've been here this long talking to you. I didn't think I had anything to say. And I'm probably going to laugh at when I read this, see this again. But it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been a
Appreciate
pleasure. I'm sorry that it took me so long to do this. But then again, maybe it's just as well, because maybe some of the things that I had to say now, I might not have said it that way before. So,
That's a good point.
because I have in the years that I've passed, relaxed some of my emotions about what I did. I don't really think I did anything special there, but I just did what I was told to do, what I was ordered to do. That's all for me. That's my message.
Bucky, we're honored and humbled that you're here today to
Thank you.
speak to us of your sacrifice and contribution that you made in service to our country. Thank you
you.
and God bless you.
Thank you.
Welcome home.
Thank you very much. Like base police.
Dressed in your 1505s?
Right. I'm wearing them, but I never actually did that duty because we were given all these uniforms and we were just taking pictures that day. That's Lincoln, Nebraska.
Okay. June of 64.
Right.
Okay.
That's Morón Air Base in Spain.
You didn't tell me you were in Spain.
Oh, that was TDY, temporary duty.
Oh my goodness.
I did two TDY tours in Spain. But that's also Morón Air Base.
Okay.
Okay, now this is me with Hans. That was my first
Oh,
dog.
you're a baby here. He does look really sweet, and you said he was stricter though than
He had
Duke.
750 pounds per square inch jaw pressure in his jaw. He could bite a golf ball in half.
He's on to someone. You called him the old man? This is July of 65. Why'd you call him the old man?
I don't know. I just I can't remember. But he really wasn't old. He was only 4 years old. But
He must have taught you things.
yeah,
Whoa. Now, the person in front of him has a lot of faith in how you're holding
that's John
that leash.
Locke's. Yeah, he was. He was
he
giving
wearing
him some
protection?
aggression training. That's aggression training.
Agitation. Now, is he wearing something on his arm, or like you see it? I mean,
Yeah,
how is he?
it's a burlap sleeve.
Okay.
And that's me and Hans again.
Okay.
And this is Duke and I out on post. That's a runway post.
He looks thirsty. His tongue's hanging out.
This is a picture of, that's how close to the runway we were. That's a C-130 taking off. That's Duke sitting high. Told him to sit high, and that's it. And this is Duke sitting on top of one of the bunkers that we were at that day. And this is he and I again out on post.
Did you ever get a German Shepherd?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Smokey.
When was that, after you got home?
Oh yeah. And this is the tent. That's a picture of the tent that we lived in.
Do you have a dog now?
No.
When was the last time you had a dog? I'm just curious.
I'm gonna say about almost 20 years ago now.
Oh.
Those are the guys that I was in that tent with. I think. Let me see.
Go ahead.
Me, Ron, Pat, Kenny Lizer. Just these three here were in the tent. Sweeney wasn't with us. He was with us though. These are all the guys that came from Da Nang. Lincoln. That's another picture of my buddy Ron.
Yeah, that's interesting. You said you went over together and left together?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Why was he your best man? You hung out the most with him?
Because we were roommates at Lincoln.
Oh.
We were together the whole time
That's a
until
good point.
we got separated when we came back from the States.
Sitting tall.
Now this is a formation. We're getting ready to go out on post. See how dark it is? That's because that's the rainy season. We snuck cameras out. We weren't supposed to take cameras with us on duty. That's another picture of Duke sitting high at the kennel. And here Duke and I are training. We're training again, but the reason why I brought this picture is see in the back, see the crates? See those crates there? That's what we brought them over in.
Oh my goodness. Not like what you see today as far as a crate.
No.
I don't know what he's doing. I told him to give me his paw, and he did that. Stupid dog. Oh, he wanted a hug. I love it.
And then this is the kennel. That was his kennel. You're going to do all these pictures, Carol?
Why not?
All right. There's the better picture of the kennel, of the crates.
It's a nice picture. Duke and I, just before training on swings, he thinks I'm nuts asking him to watch somebody while he has
That's what we worked,
a
swings
choke
and mids.
chain on.
There was 3 shifts,
Actually,
days,
he
swings,
thinks
and
I'm
mids.
nuts anyway.
But we only work swings and mids. That's another picture of us, me and my friend Nadiak.
How did the dogs get along with each other?
All the dogs in Vietnam did pretty good, but there was a couple dogs in the States that weren't in fact, one of them bit me.
Were you all right? Did you need medical care?
Yeah.
Rabies shot? No.
No, any rabies shots, but they sewed the holes, and then they had to rush me back to the hospital to take the sutures out, because you're not supposed to
Right.
sew up a dog bite.
That's right.
I didn't bring a picture of the growl pad and sign, okay. This is a picture of, these are the kind of buildings that they moved us into.
Oh, okay.
I don't know how I got this picture, but this is a picture, an aerial view of the kennel. I don't know how I got that picture.
From a guard shack, maybe?
I don't know, I don't remember. But I got up there somehow. And this is what they looked like. That's just a picture of Duke standing tall. Now this picture here I brought because on the left you see that's the entrance to the buildings that we lived in, and that was the road that my cousin walked down when I said goodbye to him.
Oh. Here's where I'm living now. It's not Park Avenue, but it sure beats where I was before. Plus, we're closer to ABO now. APO?
Yeah.
What? I forget what's APO.
The air police hit
Oh, okay.
the PMO in Fort Monmouth they call it the PMO. In the air police we call it the APO.
Oh, okay.
Provost Marshal's office.
Bucky, I neglected to cover your tour of duty stateside after you got back. We talked about your homecoming, and we didn't really talk about you had to get back to work. You're still in the Air Force.
Right. I got assigned to the kennel at Langley Field, Virginia, and they assigned me a dog. The dog's name was Dobie, D-O-B-Y. Well, Dobie was almost on his way out. He didn't have a handler, and they needed to give me a dog, so they gave me Dobie. He was like 12 years old. And nice dog, good dog. But I only had him for about 4 or 5 months, and then they had to put him down because he got sick and just died. So I spent the rest of my time as assistant kennel master at Langley. And I don't know, I became friendly with a lot of the guys that were there, and duty there was pretty routine. You know, every day was pretty much the same as the next. I would go in and help clean the kennels, feed the dogs, make sure that they got enough water, so on, and make sure that the duty roster was filled out correctly, everybody was on there where they're supposed to be and so on. Just the assistant kennel master duties is what I did.
And you had a promotion in there?
Yeah, well, I got promoted while I was on my way home. I had the promotion before when I signed in as Airman Second, but I was Airman First and didn't know it. Then the orders came, then they gave me the
Oh, I
orders.
see.
So they just didn't give them to me while I was on leave.
And the order said 4500th Air Police Squadron?
Yeah.
TAC Headquarters, Tactical Air Command?
Mm-hmm.
What were those dogs used for? They were shipped to Vietnam just like the
Same,
ones from
sentry
Lincoln?
dogs. They were all sentry
Okay.
dogs.
And
I
now
never,
you're-
I never worked with anything else but sentry dogs. We didn't, like I said, have scout dogs or cadaver dogs or like there were the dogs that were used in Vietnam for many things. The scout dogs is pretty obvious is what they did, but then we had dogs that would work just in tunnels, tunnel dogs. And the Navy had dogs that they put on boats, and then they could detect the enemy. Believe it or not, submerged in the water, they
Oh.
detected them, and they would be on the boats and alert on them. So yeah, there were a lot of variety of dogs, but in the States it was all sentries.
That's incredible that a dog can smell through metal.
Yeah, they could hear them, they could smell them breathing through the tubes that they would be submerged in the water, and then using these reeds that they call it like a straw, so that they wouldn't be detected. When the boats went by, they would submerge in the water, but the dogs could smell them,
Oh, okay.
smell and breathe them.
So the dogs would be on deck.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
yeah.
Wow. So what was it like for you to be a seasoned Vietnam veteran now, and you're training men or who are going over to Vietnam?
Well, it was, again, as I say, fairly routine. I mean, I didn't have any problem relaying any of the information and experiences that I had to the handlers that was assigned to that kennel. They were trained, well, I would say even better than me, because a lot of the guys that were in that kennel went to dog school. I never went to dog school, which is a big thing, because they teach you at at Lackland, how to train a dog, a green dog. They teach you how to train that dog. Well, I never got that training. I got all mine what they call OJT, on the job training. Well, the guys that I went to work with in Langley, they were all professionally trained dog handlers from Lackland Air Force Base. They had things that they could tell me. But what I would do,
But you learn from each other too, right?
sort of, yeah. What we would do from time to time was put on demonstrations for visiting organizations, and I would supervise that. I would supervise the training with the dog handlers, and then I would get dressed up in the suit, and then they would let the dog attack me, and we would give a demonstration of the dogs going through the obstacle course, and then doing the commands, voice commands and hand commands. I would supervise a few of them.
But you were never bit again, right?
No, I got bit while I was at Lincoln.
Right.
We were on a detail up at the bomb dump, which was off the base. And as I said before, we worked nights. So we were working swings this night, which is the middle shift between days and mids. And we had about an hour and a half to go before sun went down. So we drove up there, it was just two of us, two canine handlers. So we went up on the top of the hill to the bomb dump, and we were securing our dogs. I secured my dog, so I had him leashed to a bumper on the truck. And then I was starting to walk into the headquarters when the dog that the other guy had got loose, and he attacked me. and he got me in my right arm. Actually, it was she. It's a female dog. And Crampy was her handler. He jumped on her right away and started to choke her out. And she was almost out off my arm, and I reached around to get her nose out, and she went and grabbed my thumb and split my thumb right in half. Right down to the bone. Her canine teeth went right down to the bone, right through the nail and everything. And I went in shock. So they had to get somebody else up there to relieve me. So they took me to the hospital, and like I said, they sewed me up. Well, this they didn't sew up, they just bandaged it. But they sewed the arm up, because there was two holes here and 2 holes here.
Did it get, like, obviously didn't get the radial artery?
No, I had my dog's muzzle in my hand. And I went like that with the muzzle in front of her. And to hopefully she would try to go for the muzzle. But instead, she went for my arm when it went out like that. And then I grabbed her. And I held her like that. And she was going like that, but she couldn't move because I had locked her in. And then Crampy came and he finally choked her out. I was very lucky, because if she'd gotten the back of my arm, she'd have taken my arm right off. But she didn't.
So that's in your official medical record?
I think so.
Right.
I have never seen them, but it should have been.
It should be part of your stipend, I would think. No?
I don't know, I've never seen it.
Wow. So was your son born in Virginia then? You're in Langley for 3 years, so was your son born there?
13 months.
Oh. Where else were you then?
That was it.
Well, you were only in Vietnam until January of '67.
Right.
And then your reserve time is probably included. To
No.
March of '70?
No, I got discharged in March of '68 from Langley.
Oh. And then the 2 years were the reserve?
Yes.
Right, that makes
Yes.
sense.
Yeah, I didn't get my complete discharge until 1970.
Was it just once? Oh, okay. Interesting. All right, so I have a printout, the handlers. And I was happy to see that you're listed here.
Okay.
And actually, I wanted to ask a question about the way the dogs were named. So they're coming from all over the country?
Yeah.
So there could be more than one Duke?
Oh, yeah, but they have a number assigned to them.
Oh, the number.
See, like, each dog gets a tattoo in his ear.
So
Duke.
if there was another 128E, that was your Duke?
The 128E was my Duke.
Because there was someone named Lynn Hanson who had Duke, 128E.
From where?
I don't know, but there's an email address you could, and the date is listed as unknown.
Well, that would have to be after Billy Hall. So maybe Hanson had him after Billy Hall had him.
And then there was one that had a Duke with an unknown number, and that was 67 to 68, and that was Harold P. Manning.
I think when I joined the organization, the Vietnam Dog Handler Association, I think I found like 7 or 8 Dukes.
Oh, okay. And? But none that were,
No.
you were 128E.
No. There would be no more 128Es in the state because Duke never made it back out of Vietnam.
Oh, I see what you're saying, okay. And you just reminded me, what about nowadays how returning veterans are able to adopt their dogs? How does that make you happy, sad, bittersweet, or?
One of the accomplishments that the United States War Dog Association was able to achieve was a law that was passed. I think Bill Clinton, President Clinton, signed it, that they can no longer leave dogs behind designated as equipment, like our dogs were. If they vacate, if they evacuate anywhere, and they leave anything behind, like a tank or trucks or anything like it, that's equipment, and not allowed to leave the dogs behind. And now the dog teams stay together. They do numerous tours together. Then when the dogs will get discharged because of either they're too old or they can't perform anymore their duties. They're not euthanized. They're allowed to re-enter society and get adopted. But as a result of that law, then what happened to our dogs is never going to happen again.
Good. When was that was accomplished? Not too long ago?
Bill Clinton was president.
Oh, Bill Clinton. You already said that. I'm sorry.
It's back in the 90s.
Right, right.
And I would say
After the Gulf War?
well, we started the War Dog Association in the year 2000, but we managed to, I guess through the VDHA, get that law passed, because Bill Clinton signed it into law. I know that. So, but we have been able to, through the years, the War Dog Association, help in getting dogs placed with veterans, people that the dogs could relate to, and vice versa. And we've been very successful in that way.
That's good. It reminds me of, and also earlier in your interview, when you mentioned initially being terrified of those dogs before you became a dog handler yourself.
Yes.
Reminded me of a movie I saw, which you may have seen, with Kate Mara, the actress, but she played someone named Megan, who was a Marine, and she was instrumental in lobbying to be able to adopt her dog after she got home.
Right, I remember that. Now,
And that was bomb sniffing dogs.
the War Dog Association, we did not support her on that because it costs a lot of money to train these dogs and a lot of time and effort to train these dogs. And we didn't support her because we didn't think that dog was ready to be retired. Still had time left to serve. We wouldn't have had a problem. We wouldn't have had a problem with it if the military had designated the dog ready for retirement. But they didn't. And we didn't support her on that because we didn't think it was fair where everything that was done to train the dog and to let her take the dog when it wasn't really ready to be retired.
Oh, I see.
I mean, that was the position of the war dogs.
But in the movie, she had the same terrified feeling being around that dog until they warmed up to each other.
Right, right. Now, I don't know why, I didn't see the movie and I don't remember much about what led up to that, but I don't know why she was so terrified of the animal, but obviously she had reasons to be. But the dogs that I was afraid of were trained to attack. I don't know if this dog that she's talking about was trained to attack. If
That's
it
a good
was, well, then
point.
I can understand her fear.
Sure.
But the dogs that I was afraid of, these dogs were routinely trained to attack.
Agitated, yeah.
Yeah. And they did a good job. The idea was, behind it was the dogs are supposed to make a lot of noise and put fear into a predator so that they would choose not to attack or invade. That was the idea behind it.
As a defense
Right.
kind of weapon.
Because wherever we were outnumbered. One dog and one man, well, so maybe I have a lot of ammunition, but it's still just one man. So that dog was trained to make it sound like there was a platoon of us. Okay? Wherever we were outnumbered. at any particular point in time. So that dog was supposed to like instill fear into an invader's soul.
It's a good point.
And they did a good job. They did.
Absolutely.
To the point where the dogs did such a good job, to the point where there was a bounty on us and the dogs. If a Viet Cong soldier were able to prove that he had shot and killed a handler and a dog, and proved it with the ear from the dog that had the tattoo in it, and a patch from the soldier's shoulder with the dog patch on it, he could probably get relieved of duty for the rest of the war. But definitely would be entitled to a financial bonus. So there was a bounty on all the dog handlers, especially the scout dog handlers.
I just wanted to read something I read about K9 Da Nang Air Base. Over 4,000 war dogs served in Vietnam. When the war was over, these dogs were left behind. They were our buddies, and we will never forget them. May they rest in peace. June 10th of 2006, the U.S. War Dog Memorial was dedicated. Vietnam Memorial in Hometown.
Right.
It honors our nation's war dogs and their handlers, past, present, and future. The memorial, designed by sculptor Bruce Lindsay, consists of a bronze statue of a kneeling soldier and his dog set on a black granite base. So you've been there to the Vietnam Memorial?
I was there the day I helped raise the money to build that memorial.
Oh, okay.
So I was there, and then we rededicated it again 5 years later
Oh,
in 16, June. It wasn't the 10th, but it was, or not the 6th, it might have been the 10th of June. We had another rededication for it.
do you have any photos of you with the statue?
Not with me.
Oh, I'd like that. I wanted to ask you if you could go and have someone take your picture with the statue.
I have pictures of me with it.
Oh, good. Okay.
I have, yeah.
I look forward to whatever you could
I'll
email.
send you
to
some.
me.
Yeah, I'll
Appreciate
send you
that.
some.
Thank you again. Outstanding job.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Very glad.